What we call I am contains many items of what I have. And we always confuse what I am with what I have. For example, I have a body, but when I say I am, I mean the body. For example, I say I am going to Paris. That means the physical body is going to Paris. And sometimes I say I am suffering from headache. Suffering a both sides. That is identifying the I am with the head. I have some dollars in my pocket and I travel and I say I am traveling. So the dollars are included in the I am foolishly. Along with the pencil and the garments we have, we say I am going. And along with the affections and the attachments and the psychological complexes we have, all these dirty things put together, we call it I am. 95% of what I am should be burned away before we stand as pure I am. Nirvana, plane of consciousness. Paranirvana. Paranirvana, the consciousness of this yet the planet as one person. So you will live as one with the planetary consciousness of this yet. And then there is what is called the seventh plane, Mahaparanirvana. That is what is called the total consciousness of the whole cosmos put together. For example, our cosmos is a globe of space. Millions and millions of stars, each of which is a solar system like ours. One unit space globe is called one cosmos. There are millions of such space globes coming into existence and going out of existence continuously. Just as there are millions of human beings daily dying and daily coming into birth. The total consciousness of one space globe is called cosmic consciousness. So, with this body of yours, it is possible for you to live in the cosmic consciousness. That is what is called Mahaparanirvana, plane of existence. Of course, there are many different names to these different planes of existence. They are called lokas in Sanskrit. Every guru has given a different terminology and names to the same lokas, according to the language that was popular at the time of the guru. Just as we can understand them better in English now, each guru had his own language in which he could better communicate to his disciples. That's the reason why we have many different nomenclatures to the same set of lokas. This is according to one system, which is called the Tibetan Buddhistic system of naming these lokas. I am giving this terminology because it is made popular since the end of the previous century by the greatest of the Buddhistic monks called Madame Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. And he has given this nomenclature in her two grand books. One book is called Isis Unveiled. The second book is called The Secret Doctrine. And she has brought these names into popularity. And many Occidentals know them by these names. And also, afterwards, another such lady called Alice A. Bailey has brought as many as 24 volumes in which she has used the same terminology. Because the master who supplied this information to these two ladies was the same. He is called the Tibetan master, and he is also called Master Jwalko. And since that time, this nomenclature, Buddhistic nomenclature, has become more popular and more common in the Occident. And now there is no country among the non-republican countries that does not know this nomenclature. At least 10,000 from every nation and every country in the world, they are experts in the books of Blavatsky and Alice A. Bailey. About 36 languages have translations of the same literature. And there are many thousands of centers arranged for the study of these books. That's why I used this nomenclature. You have the tantrics using some other names for the same thing, and the yoga school giving another nomenclature, the Vedic texts giving another and the oldest of the nomenclatures. And another peculiarity and another speciality of this nomenclature is the last of the Buddhas, called Gautama the great Buddha, has used these names for his disciples. So it is so pious and sacred. And the first three planes of existence are called the lower principles, in which impurities can exist. Three higher planes, the three final planes are called higher principles. The fourth is called the middle principle. It is also called the alchemist, because it transforms the lower into the higher. And it is also called the metal mercury, because figuratively, mercury is said to have been transferred into gold through alchemy. And these three principles are also called soul consciousness. And in the tantras, they are represented by the triangle with the apex upward. The three lower principles are represented by the triangle with the apex downward, and the fourth fulcrum principle as the center. This is how all the tantras teaches about the human constitution. This is how the scriptures teaches about the human constitution. This is how Gautama the Buddha has given the secrets of the human constitution to his first set of disciples. And this emblem, which is given to the disciples through a period of 7 years. And during these 7 years, the disciple is expected only as a listener and not a speaker. In Sanskrit, he is called Shravaka, that means listener. Period of Savaka is 7 years. And then he is given the place of Bhikkhu, that means a beggar of wisdom. And then he is called, in the third stage, Mani, that is the jewel or the emblem. And then finally, he is given this jewel with the center. It is called Manipadma. One who cared to receive all these stages in a pure and systematic way, one who kept the purity of his vehicles. He is called, by Buddha, he is called Padmapani. That is, one who has the lotus in his hand. And Buddha spoke of the purity of Padmapani. He should have purity of the physical body, purity of the vital body, and purity of the mental body. And the higher three bodies cannot be made impure by anyone any day. And the fourth principle is used to purify the three lower principles. This is, in short, a comparative study of other branches of wisdom with Patanjali's yoga. Patanjali says that the practice of the 8 steps in yoga purifies the 3 lower vehicles. It burns off the impurities and leaves the vehicles pure. That is what he says in his 28th aphorism in the 2nd chapter. And now we will go again to the first of the 8 steps, called Yama. Up to now we have seen Kriya Yoga in Yama. And we are going to the other aspects of Yama. Again, let us take up as A, because the first 3 can be called Kriya Yoga. The first of these is called Ahimsa in Sanskrit. It is translated by 2 different terms by 2 different groups of people. Some people called it non-violence. Some people called it harmlessness. I like the second term because you can be violent without being harmful when you want to help sometimes. Sometimes the mother can be violent with the child because she wants the child to grow and become healthy. For example, Alice Bailey used the term harmlessness because her master Jwalkul always used the same term for ahimsa. So we should practice harmlessness as an attitude. No harm to anyone around you by thought, word and deed. This should be the attitude of our mind. If anyone questions, is it possible to live like that? That means he should wait for some time. Because this is an attitude in life and we can immediately start practicing it. And sometimes we may do mistakes. We may have faults. We may have defects. But what elevates us is the sincere attitude towards life. It is not the false logic of possibility or impossibility. The fellow who goes into logic is a grossly insincere fellow who is rather intelligent than sincere to elevate himself. So, in the process of self-elevation, it is better to reject intelligence and accept procedure given by the masters. Reject personal logic and accept what the masters say. If you want to elevate yourself, otherwise reject what they say in total and follow what you feel correct. Either follow your own intellect or follow what the masters say. There is no compromise, there is no second word or there is no third path. take the responsibility of yourself completely into your hands and do what you feel correct, or do what you feel satisfied, or leave everything to the masters and follow what they say. Even though we go on arguing for 10 years or 20 years about the truth or untruth of any one of these things, we stand where we were, where the two roads diverge. That is, do what you like or follow what the masters say. Even after 30 or 40 years of logic, intelligence and discussion, we will stand in the same place. Better to take one of the roads and proceed than to sleep as stupid in the same place. That is what Buddha said, not myself. Don't be angry with me. Buddha was a merciful man who was merciless to his followers. His close followers, they always knew him as a person who never spared anyone and who was merciless, because he was all merciful. That is what one of his direct disciples described. It is very difficult to live like that. He could live like that only because he was an avatar. He was merciless because he was all merciful. Now, about harmlessness. Follow it as an attitude in life. As far as it is possible to you, don't harm anyone, any animal or any plant. Again, the logic. Is it possible to live like that? There is the positive answer given by one of the greatest of the masters. That is, it is immaterial if you eat from the plant or the animal. But it is important that you should stop killing for eating. The same master said, you can have your food through milk, yogurt, butter, etc. without killing the animal. You can have the fruit and the leaf, etc. without killing a plant. That grandmaster is Master Pythagoras. So, if we believe in the path, let us follow them. Or if we believe that it is not possible to follow it, let us postpone yoga to the next birth. No third way. Next aspect. Truthfulness. Be truthful to the world around you. Not only truth speaking, but truthfulness is required. Truth speaking without truthfulness is useless. For example, if tomorrow you play the cassette once again, it reproduces what all I have spoken. So true, because when I cough, it reproduces the cough also. Can we call the cassette a truth-speaking master? So, it is not a truth-speaking, but it is truthfulness. If you promise anything to anyone, you mean it if you do it. That is, be truthful while you are promising him. If you say no, believe that it is not possible and say that it is impossible. Whatever you feel possible, you speak it out as possible. And whatever you feel it possible to do, then you try to do it because it is possible. Whatever you feel impossible, don't be ashamed of as impossible to you. And what you cannot do, you don't be ashamed of accepting that you cannot do it. Don't make others expect something and be disappointed of you. This is what is called truthfulness. Speak what you mean and mean what you speak. And the next aspect, eliminate thieving instinct from you. We think that many people do not have thieving instincts. Only very few people will have. That is true only with the physical level. On the mental and intellectual level, every one of us is a thief to some extent. Suppose you speak some good things. I feel that they are very good to speak. Tomorrow when I go to Paris and I use them in my conference as my own thoughts, and then people begin to admire me and I stand before them as if they are my own thoughts. This is what is called thieving instinct on the intellectual plane, which is more criminal than it is on the physical plane. Because if I want to steal this away on the physical plane, it requires a lot of courage, because I don't know how strongly someone will hit. So I have to stand prepared for many consequences if I want to steal on the physical plane. Whereas on the intellectual plane, no courage is required. This is called thieving instinct. If we read the books of many foremost thinkers, we understand that their sentences and their thoughts are being stolen by many authors. For example, the scriptures like the Old Testament and the Gospel, the Bhagavad Gita and the Tripitakas, the voice and the silence. You find a fellow taking one sentence from one of these scriptures, making a big book out of that sentence, not speaking anything of that scripture or the author at all, making a very good book with many colors in printing, throwing the book into the market at a high rate of $10. So he is the greatest of all the criminals on the earth, because he has not the goodness to acknowledge the scripture from which he has taken his matter. If such a fellow begins to practice yoga, even after 20 or 30 years he has no progress. So there should be a purification of the vehicles. And the next step is called purity of sex life. It's called brahmacharya in Sanskrit. The previous one is called asteya in Sanskrit. The previous one is called satya. Ahimsa, satya, asteya, brahmacharya. Brahmacharya is many times wrongly translated as celibacy. And then the students of yoga are terrified. Are we to practice yoga or stop it? Because they have to stop either marriage or yoga. It's not that. Brahmacharya is defined in the scriptures in the following way. Be a complete celibate until 21. Then select a proper mate for marriage, and then be a householder and enjoy sex life, observing monogamy. After you reach 49 years old, again you begin to practice celibacy. This is what is called brahmacharya. The next step is called not accepting gift from others. So many things are necessary for the purification of the vehicles. Don't think that Patanjali is cruel, but he is a doctor and a physician and a healer. He knows what is wrong with us and he knows the treatment. And he asks us to follow only if we want. Otherwise, it's not compulsory even to read his book. So the choice is always left to us. The masters never advertised their books, but they never concealed their secrets when someone came and asked. So, not accepting a gift from others. That is, some people question, how can we live in this world without accepting anything? It's not anything but a gift. What is meant by a gift? If we receive either money or something valuable for which we are not fit, it is called a gift. But if we have done something for others, and if we we receive a remuneration for what we have done, it's not a gift. So you can do your profession. You can receive what is due to you. And more than that, neither accept nor expect. So it is a practice of self-contented nature, self-satisfaction. And if your work costs $100 according to the present market rate of labors, then accept 100 minus X dollars from others. This is the formula given by the ancients about the non-acceptance of gift. The formula is accept less than what you have done to others. So let you be on the giving pole, not receiving pole. It may be $99. You are in no way in obligation with anyone. Then you have no occasion to compromise with any fellow, because you have a routine to follow, a procedure to observe. And if you live in obligation with anyone, such a thing as yoga practice is not possible in life. This is called in Sanskrit aparigraha. No, the word parigraha exactly means in Sanskrit grasp, and also it means receive. Aparigraha is do not grasp, do not receive. And according to the definition given in the scriptures, it is this formula. So this is what is called yama. And then niyama, the second one. Yes, we have a break for 10 minutes. On the physical plane, the yogic student is expected to have a complete head bath at least once in a day, and change his garments once in a day. When he changes, he should use only washed garments every time, fresh washed. He is expected to have a close-cut nails, moustache and barb. So, our idea of a yogi having a barb and big hair is not correct according to the ancients. And the yoga books teach us that every 6th day The yoga student is to shave his, get his head and barb and mustaches shaved.